Ladies and gentlemen, there's something profoundly powerful, dangerous even, about a person who can enjoy being alone, because to enjoy solitude, truly enjoy it, is not a sign of isolation or defeat. It's a manifestation of maturity, competence, and wholeness. Let's be honest, we live in a world addicted to noise, endless scrolling, flashing screens, notifications, constant distraction, and so the idea of sitting quietly with your own thoughts has become foreign, even terrifying, to many people. But here's the thing, if you can't stand being alone, if you can't sit in a room by yourself without anxiety gnawing at your soul, it's not the room that's the problem, it's you, because solitude exposes the contents of your mind. And if your mind is chaotic, if your conscience is uneasy, solitude is like a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. Now, let's flip that around. When you can enjoy being alone, when you can sit in silence and not feel lost, that's when you've become someone worth being with. Not just for others, but for yourself, because the person who can be alone is the person who is not dependent, not desperate, not weak. That's someone who's organized their mind, aligned their values, made peace with their past, and structured a vision for their future. To enjoy being alone, you have to become someone whose company is actually worthwhile, and that requires discipline. It requires confronting your own darkness, your laziness, your resentment, your envy, and shaping it into something noble, something meaningful. That's no small feat, that's a heroic task. People often ask, what should I do with my life? Start by cleaning your room, yes, but also, learn to sit quietly in it, learn to be alone with your thoughts long enough to hear them clearly. Because somewhere buried beneath the noise is a voice your own, and that voice, when trained and disciplined, can lead you somewhere remarkable. So, here's the challenge, don't run from solitude, use it. Let it strengthen you, because the man, or woman, who can be alone and still feel whole, is someone the world cannot easily manipulate. They are not desperate for approval, they are not dependent on the crowd. They can lead because they are not lost, so become that person, someone who doesn't need the world to fill them, because they've already done the hard work of filling themselves. Thank you. If you can sit alone in a room and feel calm, feel whole, that says something profound about who you are. It means you've taken on the responsibility of getting your internal house in order. Because, let's not be naive here, people who are constantly surrounded by noise, distraction, and others aren't always doing that because they love company. They're doing it because they're afraid. Afraid of their own minds, afraid of silence, afraid of what might rise to the surface when there's nothing left to distract them. Solitude is a test, and most people fail it, not because they're weak by nature, but because they've never been told why it matters, or how to master it. To enjoy being alone, you have to become someone who can carry the weight of your own being. That doesn't come naturally. It's the product of years, sometimes decades, of discipline, of confronting your shadow, of sacrificing pleasure for meaning. The kind of person who enjoys solitude is the kind of person who's built themselves into someone they respect. That's not easy, that's not casual, that's earned, and here's the danger, and it is a danger, because a person who is at peace in solitude becomes powerful. Why? Because they're not easily manipulated, they're not needy, they're not begging the world to tell them who they are. They already know. They've figured it out in the silence, in the stillness, through the suffering and through the work. That kind of person doesn't follow blindly. They lead, or if they don't lead, they stand firm, and that's just as important. Now, people will often say, well, aren't humans social creatures? Don't we need each other? Yes, absolutely. But you should bring your strength into relationships, not your emptiness. You shouldn't be in a relationship, or a friendship, or a group because you can't stand being alone. That's dependency, that's weakness. And it leads to resentment, to bitterness, to collapse. You should be with others because you want to be, not because you have to be, and that only happens when you've learned to stand on your own 2 feet, alone in silence with clarity. So if you want to be someone who thrives in this chaotic world, start there, start alone, and become someone who doesn't fear their own company, but values it. That's where real strength begins. If you find yourself agitated when you're alone, if silence feels like a threat rather than a refuge, then that's not the world's problem, that's yours, and it's a signal. It's your psyche waving a red flag saying, there's something in here you haven't dealt with. You see, solitude isn't what's dangerous, it's neutral. What makes it painful is what it reveals, and if your own thoughts are tormenting you, then you've likely been avoiding them for far too long. People drown themselves in distractions, social media, endless entertainment, mindless conversation, not because they enjoy it, but because it anesthetizes them. It numbs the inner chaos. And here's the thing, if you can't tolerate even 10 minutes of silence, that's diagnostic. It means you're carrying around unresolved conflict, guilt, anxiety, maybe all of it, and every time you stop moving, stop talking, stop filling the air with noise, it starts to surface. Of course it does. What else would you expect? This is one of the great modern tragedies. We've created an environment where people can go their entire lives without ever having to be truly alone with themselves. But what does that produce? Shallow identity, fragile egos, no resilience. Because if you can't face your own mind, how can you possibly hope to navigate the chaos of the world? How can you confront tragedy, betrayal, suffering, when the simple act of sitting in silence already breaks you? The discomfort people feel in solitude is their own disorganization. It's unintegrated trauma, bad habits, lies they've told themselves, and the longer you avoid it, the stronger it gets. You can bury it under more noise, more dopamine, more distraction, but it doesn't go away. It waits, and when your life inevitably slows down, when hardship strikes, or when the people around you step away, that's when it comes roaring back. And if you haven't developed the strength to face it, it consumes you. So, what's the answer? It's not to avoid solitude, it's to master it. Sit with yourself, listen, write, think, take apart your thoughts. Separate what's real from what's illusion. That's terrifying at first, but it's also liberating. Because once you confront the chaos, you can start to put it in order, and that's the beginning of peace, not comfort, not numbness, but real, earned peace. That's the kind of strength you want to cultivate. When you can sit alone, not out of isolation, not because you're avoiding people, but because you choose to, and feel whole, then you've reached a level of psychological integrity that most people never touch. It means you're not waiting for someone else to validate your existence. You're not constantly searching for external approval, because you've built a self that you actually admire, and that's rare. That's incredibly rare. Most people spend their lives looking outward, chasing applause, affection, affirmation. But the truth is, if you're not someone you want to be with, why would anyone else want to be with you? Why should they? If your own company bores you, irritates you, frightens you, that's not a social issue. That's an identity crisis. You've neglected the fundamental task of becoming an individual you can respect. To be someone who enjoys their own company, you have to be more than just entertained. You have to be integrated. You have to know what you stand for. You have to have values that you live by, not just parrot. You need goals that are hard enough to challenge you and meaningful enough to suffer for. And you need order, because chaos within you will always leak into everything you touch. Think of it this way, imagine you're a house. If the roof leaks, if the walls are unstable, if the lights don't work, would you want to live there? Would you want to invite someone in? Of course not. But that's how many people treat themselves. They expect others to love what they themselves cannot even tolerate. They want connection, but they haven't built anything worth connecting to. So when you can sit in a room with no one else around and still feel strong, clear, headed, maybe even grateful, what you're experiencing is the result of hard internal work. You've put in the time to confront the mess, sort it out, bring order to your psyche. You've chosen discipline over indulgence, truth over comfort, meaning over ease, and because of that, you're not a burden. You're a presence. Not needy but whole, and that kind of person is not only at peace, they're dangerous in the best possible way, because they don't demand love, they attract it, they don't chase the world, they shape it. All because they've first learned to be with themselves, and to like what they found. When you are capable of standing on your own, when you no longer need others to fill the void inside you, that's when you become genuinely powerful. Not powerful in the domineering, tyrannical sense, not manipulative, not arrogant, but powerful in the way that you can say no when it matters. You can walk away from what's toxic. You can hold your ground without trembling, because your identity isn't tethered to the approval of the crowd. It's anchored in something far deeper: competence, clarity, and moral direction. Dependency makes people weak. If your sense of worth rises and falls with the attention you get from others, then you're vulnerable, easily swayed, easily controlled. And there are plenty of systems, institutions, and people ready to take advantage of that. But the individual who enjoys solitude, who doesn't panic when the room is empty, is someone who has developed resilience. They've forged a self out of struggle. They've suffered and paid attention. They've taken responsibility bit by bit until the ground under their feet became stable. We often confuse being alone with being lonely. That's a mistake. Loneliness is the absence of connection, but solitude, chosen solitude, is the presence of self, and that's something that must be cultivated. It doesn't come from passivity. It's the result of voluntary confrontation with everything broken in you and the courage to put it back together, not for applause, not for anyone else, but because it's the right thing to do. When you can sit alone, unafraid, focused, intentional, you're not just escaping the noise, you're building immunity to it. You no longer rely on the validation of people who don't know you, who don't care about you. And that's critical, because when things go wrong, and they will go wrong, it's not the crowd that will save you, it's your character. It's your ability to think clearly under pressure, to act ethically in chaos, and to bear the weight of existence without crumbling. That's the power of self-reliance, and it's earned, not given. It's the product of daily habits, tough conversations with yourself, and the humility to admit what needs fixing. But once you've done that work, once you've earned your own respect, you become dangerous in the best sense. You're not dependent, you're grounded, and the world can no longer shake you so easily. The ability to be alone isn't just about isolation. It's a tool, a profoundly powerful tool. Because when you're alone, and you shut off the constant noise, you're finally left with the one thing most people are terrified of: your own thoughts. And that's where the work begins. In solitude, there's no one to perform for. No audience, no distractions, just you. And everything you've ignored, denied, or buried, that's not a punishment, that's an opportunity. That's where truth lives. You see, in the silence, things start to rise. Memories you've suppressed, ideas you've never followed through on, flaws you pretend aren't there, and now it's all right in front of you. Most people run from that. They reach for the phone, the drink, the distraction. But if you stay there, if you confront what shows up, that's where self-discovery begins. It's brutal, yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's also the only place you'll ever find real clarity. People think they know who they are. But ask them to sit alone without stimulation for an hour. What happens? Anxiety, restlessness, guilt, and that's revealing. Because if you don't know what's going on inside your own head, how can you claim to understand yourself? And if you don't understand yourself, how are you supposed to make wise choices or live a meaningful life? You can't. This is why solitude matters. It's not just a break from others. It's a space for refinement. You sit with your fears. You interrogate your ambitions. You examine your beliefs, not just the ones you say out loud, but the ones you act out, the ones that govern your behavior when no one is watching. That's real introspection, and it's where your conscience starts to speak up, quietly at first, but clearly if you're listening. When you engage with solitude properly, it sharpens you. You come out of it clearer, more focused, less reactive. You're not just drifting through life anymore. You're steering, and the more time you spend doing that work, the less you fear being alone, because now solitude isn't an absence, it's a sanctuary. It's where you go to recalibrate, to become more precise, more intentional, more aligned with who you actually want to be. That's the value of being alone. It's not a retreat, it's a forge, and if you stay long enough in that quiet fire, you'll walk out of it transformed. Stronger, cleaner, whole. Strength doesn't come from pretending everything is fine. It doesn't come from smiling while your life collapses underneath you. Real strength comes from doing the difficult, necessary work of facing your own demons, voluntarily. And that's exactly what solitude demands. When you're alone and truly alone, no distractions, no audience, everything you've been avoiding starts to emerge. The resentment you've buried, the bitterness you pretend isn't there, the fear you push aside every day just to get through the next hour. Solitude doesn't create those things, it reveals them, and that's why it's so hard. but that's also why it's so essential. The people who enjoy solitude aren't born that way, they've earned it. They've wrestled with their own chaos, their own weakness, and brought it under control, not perfectly, but enough to stand upright with some degree of clarity. That's not an easy process, it's brutal. It requires you to tell the truth, especially to yourself. It demands discipline, honesty, and the willingness to admit when you're wrong, and most people would rather do anything else. But if you want to grow, if you want to stop being pushed around by your impulses, your emotions, your past, you have to sit with it, you have to face it. That's what solitude gives you, the time and space to confront your flaws without excuse. And here's the paradox: the more time you spend in that discomfort, the less it controls you, the fears shrink, the anger fades, the guilt dissolves, not because it magically disappears, but because you've processed it. You've integrated it, you've learned from it, and once you do that, something extraordinary happens. You start to trust yourself, not in some shallow, motivational, slogan sense, but in a deep, grounded way. You become someone who doesn't need constant reassurance, someone who can stand in the storm without falling apart. That's the kind of person who can lead, who can bear responsibility, who can love without clinging and lose without collapsing. So if you want strength, not just the appearance of it, but the real thing, go to the places inside you that you've been avoiding. Use solitude like a mirror. See what's there, fix what you can, accept what you must. That's how you become resilient. That's how you become dangerous in the best way possible. Not by avoiding your inner chaos, but by confronting it and walking out the other side more whole than you were before.